I am Ryan Corpo, co-coordinator of Pax Christi, New York State. I am here with my colleague, former National Council Chair and Ambassador of Peace, Isaac Chandler. We are joined by Art Laffin, named a Teacher of Peace in 2016. A member of the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker House in Washington, D.C. since 1995. Art is noted for his decades-long campaign against nuclear weapons. A former member of the Covenant Peace Community in New Haven, Connecticut, Art and 8 others trespassed onto the General Dynamics Electric Boat Complex in Groton on July 4, 1982, and hammered on cruise missile hatches on the USS Florida. 7 years later, after being convicted of criminal mischief in a superior court, Art and 2 others, Jim Reel and Elmer Moss, boarded the rear end of the USS Pennsylvania and hammered a Trident submarine in what became known as the Thames River Plowshares. Art was sentenced to 60 days in prison. In addition to his activism, he is the editor of Swords into Plowshares, Nonviolent Direct Action for Disarmament, and the author of The Risk of the Cross, Living Gospel Nonviolence in the Nuclear Age. His writings have appeared in Sojourners, The Hartford Courant, and the National Catholic Reporter, among other outlets. Art, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. Thank you.
You have engaged in several nonviolent direct actions against nuclear arms over the course of the past 40 years. And in 2019, you said, quote, "These and other acts of nonviolent resistance as well, of beating the swords of our time into plowshares, are manifestations of an ethic of resurrection." Can you elaborate on this? How do you see civil disobedience connected to the resurrection?
Well, thank you for that question. Boy, we could spend some long time on that. I try as best I can to live out of the hope of the resurrection. And in fact, this morning I was at the Pentagon for the weekly Catholic Worker Vigil that we have there. And there were vigiling several of us in front of the center of war making on the planet. And I often come back to the last sentence in chapter 16 of John's Gospel, where Jesus says, "Take courage, I have overcome the world," right? And so I try to live in that hope, and I try to live in the hope of so many members of Pax Christi and so many people of faith and conscience throughout history who when confronted with evil, acted in a very courageous prophetic spirit of faith, a faith that is rooted in this belief that Jesus has overcome the forces of evil and death in our world and the powers and principalities. And so when I was involved in the 2 plowshares actions, the first plowshares action that you mentioned, the Trident 9, we hammered and poured blood on 2 sonar spheres of the Trident and also on missile hatches of the Trident submarine. And that was in USS Florida. And we spray painted on the submarine USS Auschwitz. And we hung a banner on the sonar equipment that said, "Trident, a Holocaust, an oven without walls." And we did that to underscore the fact that what we're dealing with these weapons of mass murder is the end of human history, if these weapons are ever used. The end of the human family, life as we know it on our planet. And so we try to bring a spirit of hope that God's dream for the human family is that we beat all the swords of our time into plowshares, taken from Isaiah and Micah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift a sword against nation. Never again shall they train for war. That's our mission for as people of God here on earth. To try to create that beloved community. And the hope is in the action. The hope is in community. The hope is in trying to do what God requires of us. We do what we can, and we leave the rest in God's hands. Willing to accept, the consequences, and believing that through our small, imperfect acts, that God will make something good out of it. And so when I was on the Trident submarine, after we hammered and poured blood on it in 1989 on the Thames River plowshares that you referenced, we were able to read the whole of chapter 15 of John's Gospel as we were on the tail end of the Trident. And I believe then, and I believe now, that if people act on their faith and really put into practice what they truly believe, that all things are possible. In Mark's Gospel, Jesus says all things are possible for the one who has faith. And so that's the faith that we try to live by. I try to live by, believing that if we truly act on what we believe, that this is a great sign of hope, and it is a manifestation of an ethic of resurrection, that God has the last word, that we have to do our part to incarnate the word and make it real, and God will do the rest. Life and love are stronger than the forces of death. Nonviolent witness, the power of nonviolence, is greater than any power of death in this world, I believe. And Jesus shows us that, especially when he's on the cross. I mean, when Jesus is on the cross, Jesus is a victim of capital punishment and torture. And as he's being crucified, he's asking God to forgive his killers. And he's putting into practice this seemingly impossible command to love your enemies, right? So on the cross, Jesus is showing us how to live and how to die. And Dr. King actually said that love, even for enemies, is the key to the solution of the problems of our world. And certainly, what greater statement can be made about hope and love and life and community than a statement like that?
Thank you, Art. Very profound words. So, Art, how did you first become involved in the work of Pax Christi USA, or Pax Christi in general?
Well, I became involved many years ago. Actually, I was living in Europe at the time, and I was introduced to Pax Christi International way back in 1976, 77. And I want to really take this opportunity to commend Johnny and the Pax Christi staff and National Council for all the great work they're doing, all the great work you both are doing, including organizing the recent 50th anniversary national conference this past August. So I heard about Pax Christi in Europe, and then in late 1970s, like 78, 79, I met some of the early co-founders, including Eileen Egan, Joe Fahey, Sister Mary Evelyn Jagan, Bishop Gumbleton, and Father McSorley. And then I subsequently met Ed Guinan, who was the first Pax Christi USA General Secretary, and then Gordon Zahn, the author of this extraordinary book, Solitary Witness, which documents the witness of Franz Jägerstatter, the Nazi CO who was martyred and who is now beatified. Both Bishop Gumbleton and Father McSorley have been very important models for me of how to live a life of gospel nonviolence. I also been greatly influenced by other Pax Christi teachers of peace, including Dorothy Day. Today is actually the eve of her birthday, and I had a great chance to meet her briefly before she died. I also was greatly influenced by Dan Berrigan and Phil Berrigan, Liz McAllister, Jim and Shelley Douglas, Archbishop Hunthausen, the Gossmeyers, Archbishop Dom Helder Camera. All of these people I met personally, and they made a great impact on me. And I also have been influenced by other Pax Christi teachers of peace, including Kathy Kelly, Sister Deanna Ortiz, Presente, Father Louis Vitale, Roy Bourgeois, Bill Quigley, Sister Helen Prejean, Monsignor Reyes, Sister Mary Lou Kanaki, Sister Joan Chittister, Martin Sheehan, Peter Dougherty, MJ, Jerry Park, Coleman McCarthy, Father Brian Massengale, and Marie Dennis, and to name a few. And then I've been influenced also by Father Joe Nangle and John Deere, Josephine Garnon, Charlene Howard, Judy Cote, and everyone involved in the Pax Christi Metro DC Baltimore community. And so that's just a little bit of background, and people, it's really the people living out the peace of Christ who comprise this great community of Pax Christi that has connected me to a deeper understanding of the gospel and this great work for trying to live and proclaim the gospel of nonviolence. And of course, there have been, many other influences that I've had in my life, members of the Atlantic Life community, the Catholic Peace Fellowship, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, meeting the Hibakusha, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki A-bomb survivors.
In an interview last January, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the seizure of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, you said that, quote, humanity still remains on the brink of nuclear catastrophe. Do you believe we are in a more or less dangerous position now than when you made that statement last year?
Well, listen, we're living in a time where at any moment nuclear weapons could be used because this is the policy of our government. So just think back to August 5th and 6th, 1945. There was no forewarning given to the American people or to the world that the United States would use nuclear weapons against the Japanese, And since then, the United States has always maintained a first use nuclear policy, and we are living with the reality that at any moment, if the powers that be deem that its national security interests are jeopardized, that nuclear weapons could be used, And so, and and look, this is evidenced by the fact that over $9 trillion has been spent on nuclear weapons since the Manhattan Project. And 1.7 trillion is being earmarked over the next several decades for the new U.S. nuclear modernization program. And in President Biden's 2023 military budget, over $50 billion is earmarked for nuclear weapons. So we're modernizing the nuclear arsenal. The nuclear weapons are on hair trigger alert, many of them. And now with the this terrible war in Ukraine, we're living in a moment where anything can happen. We don't know. We don't know what's being discussed behind, in the secret recesses of the Pentagon or the White House. So we are at a very dangerous moment, and I pray, along with Pax Christi and so many peacemakers around the world, that we wake up to the reality that Dr. King proclaimed, that in a nuclear age, the choice before us is no longer between violence and nonviolence. It's either nonviolence or non-existence. We either resolve our differences through nonviolence and diplomacy, or we will perish as fools.
Art, what are your hopes for the future of the Catholic peace movement and for peacemaking in general?
Well, I guess my hope for I'm involved with the faith-based peace and justice communities here in the U.S. and worldwide, and that's with the Catholic worker, with faith-based resistance communities, with the Atlantic Life community, the Southern Life community, Pacific Life community. And then, there are many other movements that I'm part of, the anti-death penalty movement, the environmental justice movement, the human rights efforts that are going on, especially around Guantanamo and ending torture and indefinite detention. And so my hope is that people can really go deeper into the scripture, into the story of Jesus, and that's where we find the hope. And then to translate that into nonviolent action. Dan Berrigan said, "Know where you stand and stand there." Right? And Dorothy Day has this great quote that I often come back to as well, and she says, as we come to know the seriousness of the situation, the war, the racism, the poverty in our world, we come to realize that things are not going to be changed simply by words or demonstrations. Rather, it's a question of living one's life in a drastically different way. And so we see that happening all over our world, and all these great, movements for racial justice, for social justice, and for peace. And we have to continue to do our part and not lose heart, and we can stay sustained in this in this effort by prayer, by reading the scripture, by community, and by staying connected with people who are, really putting their lives on the line and giving their lives in service to others. And I believe that we are definitely the people that we've been waiting for. And the Pax Christi 50th anniversary conference was a great testament to the hope. I think that we all feel that all the efforts that people are making on so many fronts, to really live and proclaim God's reign of justice, nonviolence, and peace.
Art, you had mentioned the anti-death penalty work that you've been involved in. On September 20th, 1999, your younger brother, Paul, was stabbed and killed outside the homeless shelter where he worked in Hartford, Connecticut. 9 years later, you testified to the Connecticut Judiciary Committee in support of a bill to abolish the death penalty for convicted felons, including your brother's murderer. What encouraged you to take this step?
Well, first and foremost, it was my faith in Jesus, and then I had met previously murder victim family members who had lost members of their family, and it turns out I was arrested with them for a nonviolent action, and at the unsupreme court, there's nothing supreme about a court that sanctions killing. We held a 30-foot long banner on the steps of the Supreme Court saying "Stop executions." And then we ended up, spending the night in jail, and later we went to trial. And I heard the testimony of some of these murder victim family members, and I said, "My God, I don't know if I could do what they're doing," And then I became a murder victim family member, and I really had to go deep into the well of faith, to be able to come to a place where I can show mercy and compassion toward the man who killed my brother, Dennis Sutar. And my mother was a great inspiration here. We were able to actually pray together with members of Dennis Sutar's family after my brother was killed, and we were able to see not only the we're not able to experience the deep sorrow that we were feeling, my own family was feeling, but also there was this sorrow and grief and unspeakable pain that was present in the eyes and tears of family members of Dennis Sutar, and so it was a very powerful experience, to be with Dennis's family. And my mother and I were able to convey to members of Dennis's family that they could share with Dennis, hopefully, that we pray that he can know God's forgiving love, and that we can continue to hold him in our hearts and pray for his healing. And, Dennis was ultimately deemed mentally incompetent to stand trial for this terrible, terrible act of violence. And he eventually was sentenced to a prison hospital in Connecticut, effectively given a life sentence, and that's where he is today. And so I always ask people to please pray for him, pray for his healing.
Art, do you have any message for the next generation of peace activists, peace advocates?
Well, I love this song. Paul and Silas bound in jail, had no money for to go your bail. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on. So what do we got to hold on to our faith tradition, right? We got to hold on to the hope that the holy cloud of witnesses gives us. Hold on to the hope of Jesus, who didn't ask us to do something he wasn't willing to do himself, right? And to try to live in that faith and hope of the gospel that is our life and our hope. With God, all things are possible, and without God, we can do nothing. And with God and community, I believe all things are possible. I mean, how in God's name did we ever get to a Trident submarine and hammer on it? It wasn't because of us, I mean, it was God's grace working through us, working through our weakness, that we were able to, walk with our fears that we had, our anxieties, and take that leap of faith and try to act in God's name for justice and for love and for life, for the future generations, And so I hope and pray. I meet so many young people, and I'm so inspired by what you both are doing and what the Pax Christi Adult Youth Caucus is doing, and then there's so many people you meet along the way as we vigil and bear witness in the streets of Washington, at the White House or Capitol or elsewhere. All the movements, Black Lives Matter movement, the environmental movement, Poor People's Campaign, that we're involved with, the movement to abolish the death penalty, the movement to abolish war and nuclear weapons. Many young people are involved, and we have to continue to keep our eyes on the prize. Don't lose heart, because there's the forces of power and manipulation in our culture is so strong, to divert us away from what we really need to be doing. And so just remember the power of prayer, power of community, the power of love. I'm wearing a T-shirt with a quote from Dorothy Day that says, "The only solution is love," and I deeply believe that.
All right, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and for being the first person in this series to do some singing.
Oh, you're most welcome. How can we keep from singing in such times?
There you go. All right, thank you.
Okay.